Pipelines mean serious politics federally, but also locally. And in Indigenous communities keen for economic development opportunities and environmental protection, it's a potent mix that can be complicated. With us now to help sort it all out, Delbert Wapas, former chief, Thunderchild First Nation, and head of Project Reconciliation, one of 3 Indigenous bids for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Brian Schmidt, president and CEO, Tamarack Valley Energy. Shannon Joseph, Vice President, Government Relations and Indigenous Affairs at CAP, the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, and Kelsey Leonard, who holds the Banting Postdoctoral Fellowship at McMaster University, researching water justice for Indigenous peoples in the face of climate change. And we're delighted to welcome you all to our program here tonight. And I guess I should say, before we go any further, we want to thank the Canadian Energy, the Environment and Indigenous Prosperity Conference that's been happening at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, which has essentially brought all of you to our capital city in the province of Ontario for this conversation. Delbert, what is Project Reconciliation?
Well, Project Reconciliation is a vehicle where I developed a company to deal with the socioeconomic and the economic situations within our respective communities. It's a way of economic reconciliation. The fact that we've been economically starved out, all these years has, led us into poverty. We believe that, there has to be alternative ways of realizing a better today and tomorrow for our children and those that aren't born. So it's bringing nations right across from Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia together, 340 nations.
340 First Nations.
340 First Nations. Hopefully we can get them on side, to get away from the haves and the have-nots among First Nations communities that have money and those that don't. Not asking for any money from any First Nation, but the opportunity for them to sign a declaration of support, so we can move on and purchase 51% of the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Gotcha. Shannon, maybe you could follow up on that. How many companies and or Indigenous groups altogether, to your knowledge, are bidding on the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
Well, there are three different bids on the pipeline right now from Indigenous groups. I don't think there are any companies that I know of right now, but there are certainly a lot of shippers, so producers who are members of mine who are excited for the project to be built and would welcome, any Indigenous owners in the pipeline. I think it's a positive thing, and lots of people are interested.
Well, here's, Brian, the $64,000 question, which is, why does Indigenous ownership of the Trans Mountain Pipeline matter at all anyway?
Well, it matters because I think it puts a very positive light on Indigenous relations with industry. The fact that we're going to be in partnership together, the fact that shippers are willing to sign agreements with Project Reconciliation or the other two, it's a big step. And I think the narrative on the other side is the only part that you hear. So I think we in industry look at this, okay, now we're having a balanced conversation.
What's the narrative on the other side you're referring to?
Anti-pipeline. Let's keep it in the ground and not build it at all.
Gotcha. Okay, Kelsey, your view on the Indigenous ownership angle of this whole thing?
Well, I think through the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we are sovereign nations and we have a right to self-determination. But within that, we also need to ensure that free, prior, and informed consent is being met throughout its entirety of the process.
And the courts have insisted on that.
They have, and yet we're still seeing a failure for enforcement and implementation of those rulings.
But if Indigenous groups are part of the ownership of the thing, does that not satisfy the need to consult?
Well, I think it's also a question of proportionality. We heard that there are 3 potential Indigenous groups that have put in a bid, but how many bids total have been put in for the pipeline? What does that 3 bids, what do they represent in totality of the overall bids that have been put forward?
What's your concern?
That we actually are still just a small fraction of representation of the bids that are going in, that we might actually not be competitive for those bids, that we're only just sort of tokenized once more in the process.
Shannon, what's the status on that?
I'm not aware of other bids other than the 3 Indigenous bids for the purchase of the pipeline. I know the federal government is interested in selling the pipeline, but there aren't other buyers, to my knowledge.
Delbert, to the best of your knowledge, do you expect any others to get into the bidding war?
I think that, as time goes on and once it's, the indicators that it's going to take 30 months to build, and I believe that there's probably some companies or other groups that are waiting in the weeds for it to be built and then coming out. But as of now, there's only 3. the three of us that are that are interested in moving forward. However, you have Pembina that bought the Trans Mountain interest or Kinder Morgan interest within Canada. So so are they interested at the end of the day in buying it, right? So again, as Project Reconciliation, we're interested in purchasing it now as opposed to 30 months down the road.
Kelsey, if it turns out that at the end of the day it's only 3 bids and they're all Indigenous-backed bids, does that satisfy your concerns?
Well, I think it's for those particular Indigenous coalitions to determine whether it's a good buy, if it's actually a good deal. I think there's also larger concerns that those particular Indigenous coalitions purchasing or potentially putting in a bid for purchasing do not actually represent the Indigenous nations and territories that may be impacted by the production, extraction, and shipping of oil.
Brian, do you think the federal government has so cocked this one up that it's scaring off any other private sector interest that might want to bid on this pipeline?
Well, I think a lot of private sectors are fear pipelines in Canada and investing in pipelines in Canada. I think there's a number of pipelines. If you take Gateway, there was an investment of about $600 million just to get to the stage of where you got your project approved.
Who was that by again?
That was Northern Gateway, that was Enbridge.
Enbridge, right, okay.
And so that's a very painful process. So to get to the end and then have it pulled from you. And in that particular case, there was no consultation by the federal government to talk to First Nations who were pro and supportive of that. In fact, they had an opportunity for around 30% ownership in that pipeline. No consultation before the rug was pulled from them. So we just see that as two-sided. We have to go through all the consultation and $500 million to get ready, everything all signed up, but yet something can be canceled at no notice.
Let's bring up some numbers here actually and give, because I think it's fair to say that maybe not, while we certainly in the province of Ontario understand the rough times that oil and gas have gone through in Western Canada, we may not be as up on the numbers as you folks around this table are. So let's, if we can, Sheldon, bring this graphic up and I'll describe this in some detail for those listening on podcast. Here's the Canadian oil and gas sector. This is extraction, and by the numbers, total revenue, we're in the year 2018 now, last year, total revenue rose 4.9% to $123.5 billion. Total expenses rose to $137.4 billion. That's 25.6% up over the previous years. Net losses, $13.9 billion. Royalty payments rose to $7.6 billion. That's up 14.4%. From $6.6 billion in 2017. That's a lot of numbers there, but Brian, maybe you can just sort of, as they say, fun with Dick and Jane it for us. What do those numbers tell you?
Well, that overall the industry is contracting. And, I think in the past, probably five companies in the past month gone bankrupt. The junior sector is pretty much wiped out. There used to be about 94 publicly traded companies on the TSX exchange. Now there's about 24. So been a huge reduction in that. So these numbers don't surprise me. It's pretty tough there right now.
Well, if that's the case, Delbert, why exactly are you so either encouraged or interested in doing business in a sector that is contracting and shedding jobs? Well,
I think when we look at pipelines. Indigenous ownership, I believe, will help mitigate a lot of the problem that is out there. I think that it's high time that First Nations people, Indigenous peoples get be included in this. But going back to Kelsey's point, it's important that that the land, that the environment, and the land, air, and water are all protected and all looked after. First and foremost, that's our position. As Project Reconciliation, is to ensure that, but I don't think that economy and environment have to be at opposing ends. I think that we've always lived in that balance. So when we're looking at, this opportunity that exists, the numbers there, there are companies that are leaving, but they're also, the fact of the matter is that the shippers need to ship their oil. They got to get their oil to tidewater, right? And so that's the reality. So the pipeline is going to provide the means to that, right? And it's also going to provide the means for Indigenous peoples, to at least create an economic, opportunity for themselves, to realize, something better, which is, working towards clean tech, green energy, and so on and so forth. Right now, we can't have those discussions.
Can you put some numbers on that? Just what kind of economic boost could this represent for the First Nations you represent?
Well, again, we're not privy to the, to the information, to the actual information that what the shippers, what it costs the shippers, and so on and so forth. But based on what is public knowledge and our research, we're estimating it's anywhere from $250 to $270 million a year on 51% ownership, right? And so when we talk about that, and we look at establishing what we refer to as a sovereign wealth fund, and contributing 200, depending on what the shareholders, which is representative of the 340 nations or those that want to be part of that, how much of that should go to the sovereign wealth? So for example, you take 200 million and you leverage that into $1 billion fund. You're now investing in creating opportunities within infrastructure opportunities where majority are on your traditional territory or in your reserve, right? And so our P3 projects, so you're leveraging yourself out of poverty into wealth.
Let me put into context the numbers that you referred to there.
Sure.
And what's happening. Because a lot of people feel that the oil business is tough because of the low oil price. And that's not the truth. So if you look at those numbers there, Brent pricing yesterday was $63.88. And Western Canadian Select was $33. So that's how much discounting is happening to Canadian oil.
That's a big gap.
So our business would be robust, healthy, thriving if we had not being discounted by American producers of our crude.
What's West Texas Intermediate going at now?
West Texas will be about 57.
So still a gap.
Still a huge gap. So the discounting in Canadian supply is what's causing the hardship and bankruptcies. Now, if we partner with pipeline companies to get our product to export, that's why we're so excited in working with people such as Delbert, because that has a chance to really close that gap.
Gotcha. Shannon, you wanted to say.
Well, I was just going to clarify that gap is driven by a lack of takeaway capacity. So we had expected as an industry to have Keystone XL. We thought there was going to be a Northern Gateway. There was going to be a Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. There was going to be a Line 3 expansion. And a lot of these projects have been stalled for various reasons. In the case of Northern Gateway, canceled.
You can't blame Trudeau for Keystone XL.
No,
that was Obama.
But the reality is this takeaway capacity is the constraint. And so when you ask, is this a good purchase? As we access markets, we access better prices, and it becomes a good business opportunity, certainly a benefit to our members.
The problem I have with that, though, is I hear constraint, these constraints of being able to take away Keystone XL, Line 3, all of these different routes. The constraint is the rights of Indigenous people, the rights of Indigenous nations. We are the ones that are on the front lines fighting these projects. So it's not necessarily some economic constraint or even blaming Obama. Obama actually, recognized Indigenous rights in that particular scenario and the rights of communities of color, poor communities who are disproportionately impacted by these pipelines. The problem companies should be asking is why are you routing it disproportionately through communities of color, through communities that have less access to economic power and even legal authority and power in these countries.
So if the route were changed, would that be more satisfactory?
Well, I'd like to see it maybe go through the most affluent neighborhoods in Canada and the United States. And then, maybe it would change a little bit. Maybe you'd have your takeaway routes.
Do you have a point there?
I don't think that's true. If you look at the Northern Gateway project, that was a project where a third of the assets was going to be owned by Indigenous communities. The pipeline itself, the terminal, it was kind of new from that standpoint, breaking ground and with the Aboriginal Equity Partners group. It's true that the court case was about consultation, and that's because Canada's learning to get consultation right, and we've learned a lot of things through these court cases. In the case of Line 3, I was just at a presentation yesterday that Enbridge gave in partnership with the local First Nations, talking about the work they've done together, educating their non-Indigenous workforce, and then partnering on the life cycle of the project. The court cases that are holding up that case in the U.S. are not Indigenous focused. So I think it's not a simple thing to say the reason for this is Indigenous holdup.
Right.
Yeah, and I think one important aspect that gets lost in all this is that there's 130 First Nations that produce oil and gas. and how have they been harmed by the loss in revenues? So revenues have gone down, fees and royalties collected on First Nations lands have gone down from 250 million down to 50 million. Now, you can say, well, it's not kind of a big number, but there's not that many people involved. So if you actually do the math, per family of 6, they've lost $19,000 per family. Now, $19,000 per family to any Canadian family is really important. But to families who are fighting poverty, trying to lift themselves out, these things happen without their knowledge. It's just gone.
Can I ask you the flip side of that, though, which is what do you see as being the particular risks for the Indigenous investors, whoever ends up winning this pipeline?
Well, the reason this really works is that between industry and people like Project Reconciliation is we'll sign take-or-pay contracts with the pipeline. So as a shipper, we'll say, over the next 10 years, I'm going to ship this volume of oil. That gives people like Delbert certainty when they go to get financing. And this has been done before. It's not news.
So is that to say that there is minimal risk for his investors?
There's minimal risk for his investors.
Minimal risk. Do you see it that way as well?
Exactly. It's it's a win-win all the way around. You know, like we're not asking for taxpayers' money to make the investment. To us, it's unfortunate, that back in what was it, 53, when Trans Mountain was first built, that there was no consultation back then, right? It's fortunate that you have, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip and our relatives, that are blockading and protesting, that has created the awareness and created the platform for Indigenous ownership, for consultation to ensure that this happens. I don't take anything of that away. To me, it doesn't matter where the pipeline, what the route is, but it's the respect, it's the relationship and understanding of that, right? And how we reach out. It's not. But when we look back to our...
Well, hang on a sec. Yeah. You said it doesn't matter to you, but it matters to her.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. Because it's all about ensuring that whoever needs to be spoken to, whoever needs to be consulted is consulted, right? And the understanding of that relationship. I think Ian Anderson gets it now, in regards to, what relationship means with Indigenous peoples, right? But I came from a funeral, a couple of days ago, a 10-year-old girl who hung herself, suicide.
Where?
In Makwasagagan, Loon Lake, Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Right? And that is not only isolated to that community. We're all experiencing that. But we experience it in high unemployment rates, dropout rates, lack of dollars for education, so on. So where are those going to come from? If we don't create the opportunities that exist, but not being negligent, about our relationship to land, then what else then? What else are we supposed to do?
Let me, Kelsey, I'm going to give you the first shot at responding to this, but the Yellowhead Institute is a think tank. They had this to say about the conversation we're having right now. The new dynamic will also reveal the exact spot in the relationship between First Nations and Canada where the promises of Indigenous rights recognition hit the wall of the resource economy. Immediately after the bailout, the Secwepemc Women's Warrior Society and Tiny House Warriors put out a statement that called the move, quote, a declaration of war against First Nations. They pointed to Canada's pattern of criminalizing Indigenous peoples for exercising their responsibility to protect the land and water as a warning of the coming conflict. If there is a potential Indigenous equity stake in the pipeline, do you think this could alleviate some of the tension that's going on across the country relative to other issues as well?
I don't think so. We're really, when we think about, so British Columbia actually became the first province to pass Bill 41, which is implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That's going to dramatically, I think, change the way in which this process moves forward.
How so?
Because of free, prior, and informed consent. We've talked a lot today about consultation, meaningful consultation, both of quote unquote legal jargon by Canada, the United States, does not amount to free, prior, and informed consent. And the particular importance of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is the S on the end of peoples. It's that this is both the collective rights of Indigenous peoples and nations, but also of individual Indigenous peoples. And so free, prior, and informed consent is for both individuals and the collective. And that's where you see these women's warrior societies and warrior societies across Turtle Island in North America standing up and fighting for their rights, because they do not believe that meaningful consultation has amounted to their consent, and they have not given that consent.
Canada has committed, I think through Bill C-69, to an impact assessment process that ought to take environmental considerations into account. Are you satisfied that that's going to be attended to well?
No, I think we actually, globally, but particularly in Canada and the United States, we need a reform of our environmental impact assessment processes, particularly how they relate to the fossil fuel industry. We see a lot of tribal nations, Indigenous nations, First Nations across Canada and the United States working right now to develop our own environmental impact assessment processes for these particular reasons, majority of which result from the fact that the totality of the pipeline is not being examined in these environmental impact assessments. They're very much piecemeal. And furthermore, they look at Western science. They don't privilege our traditional knowledge or our Indigenous science in the environmental review process. And these are really easy reforms that we could be implementing to ensure that we actually are getting to a process of free, prior, and informed consent where the information is adequate and really tapping into our best available science, which is a blend of Western and Indigenous.
Shannon, you want to speak to that?
Well, one thing I would add is that C-69, for all the things we're concerned about as industry, does also prioritize Indigenous consultation and engagement. There's a framework being looked at right now for how to integrate Indigenous knowledge. So,
In totality, though, in the way that Kelsey suggests?
I don't know what Kelsey means, but I know that the Government of Canada is working with a committee which includes Indigenous leaders to look at this issue and how to do it. So I think Canada takes these things seriously, but also we want to operate within a rule of law framework that's predictable.
No, for sure. But listen, I'm inferring here. You tell me if I'm wrong. But when she talks about in totality, I presume it's that local knowledge and that traditional approach that you have to issues that maybe is not accommodated for in C-69.
In C-69, this project is studied in its totality based on what the project is. And to the extent that we become better at integrating other forms of knowledge into that assessment, that's going to be a positive thing. But there will be people who won't be satisfied by that process, potentially. But I think if we act in good faith, working together to try and do these things, we'll get to a better place.
Did I get that right? When you mean in totality, you mean what?
Yes, so in totality, I mean both in totality of inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and science into the full process, but also in the totality of the project, so the length of the pipeline, looking at it across from start to end. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of conflict, is we are doing it piecemeal, now potentially addressing this, but it's all still potentialities, or even the reference to good faith. As Indigenous nations and peoples, we've had a lot of lip service to good faith over the past 4 centuries. That hasn't very much amounted to much. And so I think we are looking to stop having commitments of good faith and to actually put it into practice.
I'd like to get
Please.
involved in that. We have a relationship with Husky Energy, and and that was in good faith. And I can tell you that our relationship with Husky is top notch, and how they respect what it is we have to do as our nation when it comes to protocol, comes to ceremony, comes to our relationship to land, and so on and so forth. And I got to speak about that because that's what it is. And there are probably many examples out there where Indigenous peoples can talk about that relationship with industry, and there's probably examples where there's no relationship. But when we talk about pipelines, is it safer, to truck oil by rail, going through pristine territory through the Rockies?
I think the evidence is that it's not.
Exactly. And how many oil spills or have the train carts, tipped over?
Okay, but I got to ask you I got to follow up on by how many hundreds of First Nations did you say that were going to be affected? 300 and some odd?
340.
340. Okay. Do you know for a fact that you have the majority of the chiefs of those 340 First Nations on side for what you're planning, or the majority of their constituents?
I think that there are the majority, that what do you call agree with pipeline, because those that are affected right on the line. Right, there's 122 that are affected on the line. 122 of them have IBAs.
Have which?
In impact benefit agreements.
Okay.
Or close to 122, right? So all of Alberta, are most of Alberta is supportive of it. Most of Saskatchewan is supportive of it, right? And you have those First Nations. Look at the LNG project, right? The LNG project. How many First Nations have signed on to that, and want to be part of that, right? So when you start putting the numbers together, right? The majority, I would say the majority of British Columbia believes in pipeline.
Well, the government of British Columbia at the moment doesn't. They're not a big fan of it.
Well, that's the government of British Columbia, but, Indigenous nations,
Go ahead, Brian.
I just want to just follow up on Indigenous participation and why don't we just avoid going through First Nations territory and put them in other areas. And in my business, there was a time when we would avoid First Nations territory and route around, not bother. It was seen as an issue, and I think the times have really changed. Probably maybe not as much in BC, but certainly in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Why wouldn't you want that kind of activity in your community? If you look at who's employing Indigenous people, the resource sector is employing about 7.8% of our staff are Indigenous people. That compares to the federal government at 4.7%, compares to the rest of industry at 3.9%. We're doing a much better job, employing twice as much as what the federal government is, even though they're nationwide and we're just looking at one sector. The average Indigenous employment around our projects is about 98,000 per year, taking people out of poverty and a job of about 98,000, and that's that's 2 times the salary of all other Indigenous peoples.
Can I just ask Kelsey, is that meaningful to you, those numbers he just gave?
I think with those numbers that you just gave, what I thought of are what are some of the costs with bringing these types of industries to First Nations and Indigenous territories. And one of the clear images that came to my mind in that moment was missing and murdered Indigenous women, and the particularities of man camps and the way in which they put our bodies as Indigenous women in jeopardy, and the way in which this industry has not been held accountable to the damage that it has caused when it comes to the violation of Indigenous women and girls across this country. And I think that that's something we really have to reconcile if we're going to move forward. So to me, it's not just about bringing jobs, but it's what's the sort of unaccounted for costs of those jobs, and maybe it's not worth it.
I think that was referenced in the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women's
It was referenced
report.
it's a very poorly understood stat, and I think the committee would even recommend that. And I think more work should be done on it, because in terms of industry's view on that, we're actually doing, I think, a good job at living people's standards, bringing them up around the communities where they live and work. So I think the jury's, in my opinion, the jury's out. I think more work needs to be done to study that. There's probably, and I would admit there's places where we could do better. But for a lot of women, that's opportunity. It's jobs that they wouldn't otherwise have.
But the fact that we've been economically starved out from participating in this type of industry, this type of opportunity, has created the poverty and has, there's not only missing and murdered Indigenous women, but missing and murdered Indigenous men. Everybody's affected by it, right? So the more we create the opportunity, the economic opportunity, the less we're going to have those situations of happening. Take, for example, Thunderchild. If it wasn't for the oil and gas industry, we wouldn't be building a $24 million wellness center, a hockey rink and a field house.
This is your First Nation.
Yes.
Where is that?
Thunderchild in Saskatchewan, right? You know, so it's through those relationships that we're able to leverage. We went from borderline third-party management, to an $8 million farming operation, a cannabis operation, oil and gas operation, and getting into commercial property, so on and so forth. That was from leveraging, from a situation, from a relationship into something that is a better quality of life for our people.
Understood. Let me just play. We've got a few minutes to go here. And the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Peter MacKay was on this program a couple of weeks ago, I think. And we got onto the issue of all of this that we're talking about now. And I want to play a little snippet of what he had to say about that and get your comments on it. Sheldon, if you would.
Atlantic Canada, where I'm from, where we have a refinery. And what are we refining there, Steve? We're refining product from Saudi Arabia, from Venezuela, from places where, again, we are not working towards any sort of global climate change solution. We're simply propping up dictatorships and funding their very dirty oil and gas production. And
unethical oil, as someone called it.
Unethical oil. So there's a massive opportunity here. But it can't be lip service, and people in the West are apoplectic unless this happens quickly.
At the risk of handing you a softball question, is our oil really any more ethical than anybody else's?
So Yale did their environmental performance index, I think in the past year, and it showed that Canada was #1 out of oil-producing nations in the world in terms of environmental performance and leadership. I think also, Canada is a country that doesn't have child labor, that has safety standards for workers, and our companies don't just meet standards, they try to go beyond those standards and be leaders in safety. So there is a strong case to be made for the kind of work that our companies do.
So let me put that to Kelsey. If, who used to say, don't make perfection the enemy of the good? I think Brian Mulrooney used to say that. If our oil is, by objective standards, more ethically produced, refined, et cetera, than anybody else's in the world is that another argument for getting on board?
Well, I don't necessarily know that we can say that it is or ethically produced or not unethical. Yale is a very reputable institution, but that index doesn't have anything on Indigenous rights. So until we actually have a global...
But the Saudis wouldn't either, or the Venezuelans wouldn't either.
Actually, Venezuela would. And if we had an independent body, maybe looking through the United Nations Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples or the UN Permanent Forum for Indigenous Issues, or potentially Yale itself. It's a very great institution. Harvard Project on American Economic Indian Development. We have institutions out there that could do these types of studies. Maybe Yellowhead even has it in their future plans. But we do not have a global study that actually looks at the analysis of the extraction by the fossil fuel industry as it relates to Indigenous rights per the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and our acceptance of international law. So I think right now I can't say that this particular type of extraction within Canada, as it relates to Indigenous peoples, is ethical.
In which case, can I go back over here? Would you acknowledge that there's still a job for CAP to make our oil ethical relative to other countries, though it may be even more ethical?
So, if we just look at the GHG emission performance, if Canada's standards, say around methane, were implemented by other producers around the world, the GHG per barrel would drop by 23%. That's by doing our current standards. Of course, Canada's going beyond that now to go 45% below where they are. And so, sure, there's more work to be done, and we are pursuing that work. And we are pursuing, on the Indigenous front, partnerships, relationships. And, Brian can talk about the work that he's done. Delbert can talk about the relationships he's had with some of our companies. So there's always ways to be better. But I think we are leaders in the world. And, if you compare us to other countries, Venezuela's industry has collapsed. And I'm, to the extent that they pay lip service to Indigenous rights, I'm sure those Indigenous Venezuelans are starving alongside the other Venezuelans.
Okay, I'm afraid that's our time, everybody, but we're grateful that you all could spare some time from your conference to come up to our studio and share your views on this. Kelsey Leonard from McMaster University and Brian Schmidt from Tamarack Valley Energy. And Delbert Wapas from Project Reconciliation and Shannon Joseph from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. Thanks so much for coming up to TVO tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.